Zola Budd Pieterse is a South African middle distance and long distance runner. She competed at the 1984 Olympic Games for Great Britain and 1992 Olympic Games for South Africa, both times in the 3,000 metres.
She broke her first world record at the age of 17, an athletics legend that was and is still celebrated by South Africans from all walks of life. She's a symbol of hope that spoke through her feet. Welcome to the 2021 Forbes Women Africa Leading Women Summit. And my name is Zinathi Gquma. No, I'm not the legend. She actually joins me now, and her name is Zola Budd Pieterse. Thank you so much for joining us, Zola.
Thank you so much for having me.
I must say, this is such an incredible moment for me because I grew up hearing about Zola Budd, but I'll go deeper into that a little bit later. But I just want to know from you, when did your love for running start? I mean, you broke your first record at the age of 17. That's pretty young. When did your love for running start, and when did you actually realize that you could do it competitively?
I think my love for running started up because of my older sister. She used to take me out for runs, and she was really active. So I started jogging with her at that time when I was still very young. And then at school, you had to do a sport, but I was really useless at everything else. So I couldn't swim or do any ball sports. I was just so bad at it. So running was the easiest way out for me. So I just started to do running, and I enjoyed the solitude of it. And I think that's what attracted me to running.
And I mean, back then, was it compulsory or was it by choice?
Back then it was compulsory because at school you had to do a winter and a summer sport. And I tried my hand at netball, but I was really bad at that and I couldn't swim. So running was the obvious choice for me, definitely.
Yeah, so you talk about summer and winter sports. Running, if I remember correctly, was a summer sport, right?
Yes, at that time we didn't have cross country, so we just had track in the summer, and in the winter I dabbled in a little bit of netball, and that was about it. But I didn't have enough ball sense to really be a good netball player.
For a lot of us, as much as you may do it competitively, there's always that thing that, I mean, you're in school and, you know, you think that you're going to do something else in terms of your career. When did you decide that this running would be a career for you?
I don't think it was a conscious decision or a conscious choice. I think it was more or less made for me by circumstances. In 84, I graduated high school at the end of 1983, and 84, the opportunity came to become a professional runner and move to the UK and run for the UK at that time, because South Africa wasn't allowed to run internationally. So I don't think it was a conscious choice of mine to become a professional athlete. It just happened, and opportunities came on my doorstep, more or less, and that's how it happened.
And I mean, you're saying that it just happens. What did your training routine consist of? I mean, for you to be breaking records at 17, you must have had a hectic training schedule.
Yes, I think first of all, the group I trained with at high school was a very supportive group. So we were a close-knit group of girls. There were mostly girls in the group. We didn't have a lot of boys. I think the training was probably a bit too hectic for them. But so they were very supportive, and we were very supportive of each other. So for me, it wasn't a schlep going to training. I actually enjoyed it because my friends were there. So first of all, that was it. And then the other thing is I was very determined. I just put all my effort and everything into my running, and it came easy in a way. I mean, it was still hard work and hard effort, but I actually enjoyed, like I say, I think I was drawn to the solitude of the running and the running experience. It really still draws me. Even to this day, I still enjoy going out for a run.
And I mean, a lot of people, especially nowadays, are quite shocked that you actually used to run barefoot a lot of the time. And I actually, thinking back to also my athletics days, you know, running barefoot was actually pretty normal back in those days. It's only now where you need to have, you know, state-of-the-art shoes. But I mean, as you went deeper into your professional career in running, did you ever feel any pressure to now start wearing shoes?
Yes, I think I lost a few sponsors because I wasn't wearing shoes as such, but I always, even now, I still feel so much faster running barefoot. And it's just, if you look into the biomechanics of running, if you run barefoot, your biomechanics is very different from running with shoes. So it just makes it, people always say they feel lighter running barefoot, but it's more or less your biomechanics that's different when you run barefoot. So that's what I enjoyed. I enjoyed the freedom of it, and your proprioception when running barefoot so much better than running in shoes. And I think there's a lot of research that has been done, especially for distance runners, where it actually shows that running barefoot is conducive to preventing injuries as well as increasing your performance.
You say that you lost quite a few sponsorships because you just refused to wear shoes sometimes. And I mean, I think, in the age of influencers and everybody just wanting sponsors and money, people want money. Was there never anybody in your life, that would whisper in your ear that, you need to start wearing shoes because we're about to lose money now? Or was it a case of, you just want to run, you don't care, whether there's money in there or not?
Yeah, I was fortunate that at that time Brooks sponsored me, and their slogan was "It's Brooks or nothing," which was quite funny. But so they worked around, because what people don't realize is that most of my training I actually did in shoes, because most of my training was on the road, and I never ran barefoot on the road. I only ran barefoot on the track and like on grass fields. But when I did my runs on the road, it was always in shoes. So most of my training I did in shoes. It was only when I went to races that on the track that I ran barefoot and raced barefoot.
At that time, obviously, the first time that you broke a record, it was in South Africa during apartheid, and it wasn't recognized. I watched an interview where you actually said that you didn't care that it wasn't recognized, or you actually knew that you ran fast. Where did you get that confidence to be able to shrug off all the noise and everything that everybody was saying, and to just tell yourself that, what, I ran a fast time and I did what I knew I could do? Where did you get that confidence?
I think it's growing up in South Africa, and especially Bloemfontein. You have to remember that I was part of a generation of amazing athletes, and I was privileged to have athletes like Zolile Java and Bessel Seribe and Janu Lane and Matthew Stemani. Actually, growing up, watching them almost every weekend, running sub 29-minute 10Ks at altitude on road races. So for me, I was privileged to have them as my role models in the area where I grew up and watched them. And for us as a generation of athletes at that time, that's all we had. We had the times we could run and performances, because we couldn't compete overseas. So I think for every athlete growing up in that generation and that time frame, it was all about times and running really good times on the track, and the quality of racing at that time was amazing. I mean, if you look at the distance, the golden era of distance running, what they call it then, how many great athletes South Africa had.
You kept on breaking record after record. What do you attribute that advancement each time to?
I think it's a personal motivation, because when I was in grade 9, standard 7, my sister unfortunately passed away, and it was, for me, it was a way of dealing with the pain. So I'd rather go out and run and feel the physical pain and run away from the emotional pain. So for me, it was an escape. It was really, I think that's what drove me to get up at 5 a.m. and go for a run before school, and then train myself almost to death's door in the afternoon again, and really go above and beyond what was necessary. I think it was that psychological intrinsic motivation that sort of pushed me to become the runner I was, definitely.
I watched an interview with you, and you said at that time you were thrown into the political arena, without your permission. You didn't even know anything about politics. You actually didn't even know about the situation in South Africa until you went to Britain and people started talking about it. You didn't even know who Nelson Mandela was, and you got thrown into it, and everybody just expected you to, voice out your opinion on what you think about the situation in South Africa. And you actually said in the interview that you weren't brave enough to speak out because you were worried that you'd be banned from coming back to South Africa, and you really, really wanted to come back home. I just want to know, did you eventually find that voice of courage? And, when was it? And what do you attribute it to?
I think people forget the circumstances of the old South Africa, how we grew up. If you think back, now the name Nelson Mandela wasn't mentioned. The ANC wasn't mentioned in any news articles, in newspapers, on the news, nothing. So we had no, and the news was controlled by the then government. Didn't have internet or anything like that. I remember the first international newscast we got was in 1989. We got CNN. So growing up in South Africa at that time, my generation, remember Nelson Mandela was imprisoned in 1962 and I was born 1966. So I didn't even know about his existence. When I showed up at one of my first races in the UK, there was a demonstrator there with the sign that said Free Nelson Mandela. And I remember I turned to my coach and I said, who is Nelson Mandela? And it was only then that I think you have to move out of your country. Even now in South Africa, you have to be outside of your country to look back and get some perspective of what's happening in your own country. It was only later on that I realized what was happening in my own country, but I was desperately unhappy in England in the beginning and I didn't want to stay there. So everybody pushed me to make a political statement. First of all, I feel I was knowledgeable enough to know what was going on in South Africa at that time. And then the other thing is I was scared. I wouldn't be allowed to go back to South Africa because my family was still there and I desperately wanted to go back to South Africa. So yes, I think my voice, everything changed in the late 80s when everything started to open up and it became more popular to voice. And I remember in the Afrikaans community, it was the musicians who were the first ones to speak up and start writing songs about the political situation in South Africa and what's going on. And it's only then when the artists started voicing and their discontent with what's happening in South Africa, and people weren't afraid of talking about it anymore and speaking up. I think then I found my voice. But it was really tough as a 17-year-old in a new country coming from Bloemfontein, although it's the most exciting city in the world, to find your voice if you've never had the opportunity to speak out about anything else in your life before.
Yeah, absolutely incredible journey. And I mean, Zola, I spoke to you off air and, I told you about how, I've always heard the name Zola Budd. Young athletes in the townships would, sing songs that I want to be like Zola Budd. And even Brenda Fassie had a song about Zola Budd. And I mean, how did it feel to be admired by South Africans from all walks of life? How did you receive that love?
I think growing up in South Africa and especially in Bloemfontein, where running wasn't separated at that time. I don't know what other word to use. So, like I've said, my role models at that time in running was someone like Zolile Java and Matthew Stemani, amazing runners, and watch them run. So I always felt accepted, and we had our own little culture as runners that we stuck together and supported each other. So we always felt part of that community, of the running community in South Africa, which was really strong at that time. So the support we felt, and all of us athletes felt from the community as a whole, and being recognized for our performance, I think everybody really welcomed that support. So we always had that extra support for us as a running community. I never experienced it as, oh, it's Zola that's getting the support. I always experience it's something that our running community is getting as runners, because in a way at that time were very few athletes who could actually go overseas, like Sydney Maria and Freddie Williams, and there weren't many athletes. So any athlete that could go overseas and compete overseas was really supported by the running community as well.
Absolutely, absolutely amazing. And of course, that is what we are all about at the Forbes Women Africa Leading Women Summit Award. And that is Summit, and that is leadership. Thank you so much for your time, Zola. Thank you for your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that is it from me, Zinathi Gquma. Till next time, goodbye.